Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends on the West, and good in-between time to our friends in the in-between spaces, which we all find ourselves more and more these days. And also good whatever time it is in Canada, which I suppose we'll find out. Very excited about tonight's show. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice virtual headquarters. As always, my name is Robert Say the Schreiber. I am the chief activist here and your host this evening, as I have been for 170 some odd episodes indeed, many of them very odd indeed. Thrilled for tonight's show. Ryan North is a tremendous writer, just a Renaissance man. So many different things that he has done, and I'm so excited. As I said to him in the green room earlier when we were talking, if this is a first date, he would check off all the boxes. We're going to talk about his adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut, who is my favorite author. We're going to talk about his work on Adventure Time Comics, which when my son was a wee lad, we used to watch and read and enjoy that so much, and so much more. In fact, even there's a very odd thing, which we'll get into, but one of the things that I do as a mind game for myself when I'm trying to kind of get myself settled is think about, if I went back in time, what would I need to make that work, and how can I make the changes I'd want to make? And he actually wrote a whole book on this, I believe. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's very odd connections. And most of all, it is the eve of both our birthdays. So all this and more we'll talk about in about 5 minutes or so, and we're going to have quite the night. I think I'm going to enjoy this one more than anybody else. I'm just very super psyched about this. But before we bring Ryan to our virtual stage, I do want to talk about a couple of things. As always, I want to tell you what's coming up on the Power Hour in the next month or so, and also share with you that we had a really great interaction today with our local police department. The West Windsor Police Department asked us to advise them on their LGBTQIA policy. And they were incredibly open and incredibly really interested in doing the best way possible and being the most amenable to making sure that they serve the community in the most appropriate and caring way possible. And I want to thank our community outreach coordinator, Carol Watchler, for taking point on that. And we had a wonderful conversation today. So thank you so much to the West Windsor Police Department for allowing us to be of some small service to our community today. And coming up on the Power Hour in the next month or so, on Thursday night, we have an incredible panel discussion about Disclosure. If you haven't watched this film yet, please do in the next couple of days so you're going to be ready for this great discussion. Disclosure is a documentary film about the transgender experience in pop culture. Right now, it's on Netflix. We're going to talk with one of the filmmakers, and our own board member and trans activist, Erin Worrell, will be with us as well. Jill Sobule will be back on Friday, of course, with special guest Mike Hotpence. It's going to be a great concert and conversation. She is an incredible musician, self-professed two-hit wonder, supermodel, and I Kissed a Girl, but her catalog is much deeper and more resonant than that. So please join us for that incredible concert on Friday. And then coming up in the near future, we have Monique Morris, who's the founder of Black Girl Freedom Fund. We have Jonathan Alter, come on, author of His Very Best, Jimmy Carter, A Life, and also 2 pivotal books on Obama. Malcolm Kenyatta will be with us, who I'm sure you saw on Lawrence O'Donnell last week, 2 weeks ago on Rachel, and then a few months back was one of the keynote addresses at the DNC, and also the first openly gay Black legislator in Pennsylvania. We have, speaking of Obama, Pete Souza is going to be with us, who was, of course, the official White House photographer for not only Obama, but for Reagan as well. And his movie, The Way I See It, is now playing on MSNBC, and it's an incredible testament to, shall we say, better times? The author of Ali, A Life, the definitive book of Muhammad Ali, Jonathan Igle, will be with us. Andrew Aiden will be with us, who is a close advisor to the Honorable John Lewis and wrote this graphic novel adaptation of his life called March. Also coming up, we have Franklin Leonard, who is the creator of The Blacklist. And finally, finally, last but not least in any way, shape, or form, on election eve, which is almost as important as the eve of our birthdays, but on election eve, Anoa Changa is going to be with us. And Anoa is an incredible electoral justice reporter. And she is going to help us to ease into election day. And she'll have all the 411 that we need to make sure that we are ready, empowered, educated, and can move forward in that day, which will be at the very least, let's say, fraught. So we're looking forward to having Anoa back in the Power Hour, and I'm so very, very thankful that she has agreed to join us. I'm sure was a night she had many invitations to be in many places, and she chose to be with us and with our beloved community. So that's what we have coming up in the Power Hour. We're so thrilled about all these things, and we have a lot more, a couple of surprises we're still working on, but that's what we have coming at you, because we know that Election Day and the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting. So we want to make sure that we're here 7 p.m., 4 p.m. Pacific every evening to bring you the Power Hour and to join in virtual community. But tonight, as I said, we have quite the guest. Ryan North is the creator and author of Dinosaur Comics, writer of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl for Marvel Comics and Adventure Time for Boom, winner of multiple Eisner and Harvey Awards. He turned Shakespeare into New York Times best-selling Choose Your Own Path book, which was phenomenal, and a whole bunch of other stuff, including most recently a graphic novel adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. But what really got me, as I said before, is that we share the same birthday, which happens to be on the morrow. So please welcome to our virtual stage to celebrate our mutual birthday eves, Ryan North, everybody. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So excited. As I said, I'm kind of giddy because there's so many things that are just strangely parallel in our interests, and what you do are right in the wheelhouse. So I'm afraid that I might be too personally involved and too at stake for what's going on today. So you're gonna have to call me off and definitely keep me on the straight and narrow. So thank you so much, my friend.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
What an eclectic, let's just start here. What an eclectic body of work you have. Ranging from Squirrel Girl to Adventure Time to Shakespeare to Vonnegut, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's dinosaurs in between there too. So my first question really is, how do you choose your projects? Because they're so wide-ranging, they're so disparate, but there's a thread, obviously, which you must see. So please share that secret origin with us.
I like that your question presupposes I have this thread and I have this master plan, and I'm really good at knowing what I'm doing. I have this thing that I recognize is a weakness. It's a problem I deal with where I get a bit twitchy around originality. And I'll give you an example of that. I started writing in 2003. Sort of my first professional writing was doing Dinosaur Comics, which is a webcomic where it's always the same pictures. And I changed the words so I don't know how to draw. And I thought this was a really clever, original idea for someone who doesn't know how to draw to work in a visual medium and to work in comics. And I started it, and I still do today. There's been like over 3,000 installments. It's almost, I think it's 18 years, closing up on 20 years of reusing these same 6 pictures. But I found out about 6 months in that David Lynch, who we know is a filmmaker now, used to do comics when he was an undergrad. And he did a comic called The Angriest Dog in the World, which is just 3 panels about this very angry dog. And he would always use those same 3 panels. He would redraw them, but it was basically the same idea of change the words, keep the art. And had I known that David Lynch had done this, that I hadn't thought of this idea all by myself, I would not have started Dinosaur Comics. I would probably be working as a computer developer, a software developer right now, instead of a writer. So all that to say, I don't really have a plan, but I like projects that I feel like have that bit of originality to them, who give me the chance to do something that hasn't necessarily been done before, and I get a chance to play with it. For example, the Shakespeare books, I thought of doing Choose Your Own Path interactive Shakespeare on a long car ride, and I got really excited, and then it was 3 hours till I got home, and I remember being really nervous Googling, like, Choose Your Own Adventure Shakespeare, because had it been done, then I would have wasted the past 3 hours getting excited about this, but I also would have saved myself the next 2 years of having to write it, so sort of balanced out. But I didn't want to do it twice. The time travel book, How to Invent Everything, that came because when I was a kid, I was 12 years old. I saw Back to the Future. I'm more like 6 years old, and I just loved it and kept thinking about time travel and this idea of bootstrapping technology, of taking an idea from the future, bringing it back in time, and then having the technology ahead of schedule, and getting obsessed with this idea of if I were sent back in time, what would I do? And what would I bring? What would I say? And how would I prove it? And what technologies could I reinvent from scratch? And I honestly waited 20 years for someone to write that book. That's just like, here's what you need to know if you go back in time to rebuild society from scratch. Here's a technological civilization in a book, go. And no one was writing it. And I finally was like, I guess I'll write it myself, but I didn't really want to because it's a lot of research and a lot of work. So yeah, that's a long answer to a simple question, but I think the core of it is I like things that are that have some element of newness, of uncertainty, of a chance to go catastrophically wrong, and that interests me, I guess.
So as my lovely bride would say, who's a public defender, you open the door. So since you open the door, I do want to talk about this time travel thing just for a minute. And don't let me, because I could go for a full hour on this, but I find this fascinating. Sure. I also have this flight of fancy, and back when I had free time, which was a while back, I used to indulge myself and think about, if you went back in time, first of all, the constructs of it, like you'd have to bring back money that was printed in that era you were in. If you had money in your pocket that was printed now, it would be worthless, and it would be, but you'd have to know you're going back to 1953 and have money that was printed before that time, and then I would think about all those really small details, and then I would think about the larger picture. And when do you want to go back to? Do you want to go back to before 9/11 and warn people about 9/11? And if you warn people about 9/11, then what happens, to all the things that happen after that? And these huge things that you do affect these smaller things. And if you do that, then, you tell Al Gore, and then Al Gore can tell folks about it, and then he becomes president. And then if he becomes president, though, does Barack Obama ever get to be president? Or does that push that back? So all these things, these are all the mechanisms that I would imagine and allow myself to indulge in. Was that sort of how the genesis for you as well?
Yeah. The main thing with the book that I wanted sort of to avoid getting stuck in those blind alleys, it's not even blind alley, just like interesting questions that you can't really answer. The premise of the book is that when you go back in time, you're going back in time and entering a parallel universe. So you can't, step on a butterfly and prevent yourself from being born. And it avoids all those really, fraught ethical questions of like, yeah, you go back in time and you stop 9/11 and you save the people who died on that day, but then you're killing all people born after that who were born because of what happened. Like it's really fraught. So that's the premise of the book. And lets me sort of have some fun jokes of like how wildly it's safe for us, but it's still like wildly unethical to be going to a parallel universe and just, it's not ours, so it doesn't count. So you can, steal things and use it for resource extraction and give yourself lottery numbers and like do this really destructive stuff in a universe that to yourself is fake, but to everyone else living in it is just as real as ours. So there's sort of some black comedy there that we get to, or dark comedy that we get to have with the premise. Sort of like, this is clearly ludicrous and insanely dangerous to be renting out time machines to members of the general public willy-nilly, but let's assume they have, and now let's enjoy the book.
See, and there's the thread. That's the thread that I see in your work. I see a humanism in your work.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'll agree to that.
Even through the most absurd, Adventure Time is this surreal, based on this cartoon that, was just, I couldn't believe what I was watching. You're like, this is for kids, but it was just so incredibly powerful. But there's this humanism in it. There's this depth to it. And even Squirrel Girl, which even saying Squirrel Girl, even saying those words, for anybody that doesn't know that comic, you're like, that sounds absurd. But there is an incredible tenderness, there's an incredible love of the human condition, which I think brings us to Vonnegut, who was a humanist with the capital H, who believed in being good for being good's sake. That there was no reward for us afterwards. It was a matter of just being good to each other because that's what we should do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I'm a huge fan of Vonnegut. I wouldn't have ever tried to adapt his work if I wasn't already a fan of it and loved it. And it was the same thing with Adventure Time, where very similar circumstances, where I was asked, hey, the editor at Boom, which published Adventure Time, said, hey, I love your work. Would you be interested in writing an Adventure Time comic for us? And if I didn't already love the show and seen all of it and knew it all like to heart, then I would have said no, because I was a kid who read Star Trek novels, and some of them were not great. And at the time, I thought the writers had just not paid attention. Like, they'd have some, the use of the warp fields that was non-canonical, and I'd be like, did I not watch the show? I could do better than this. But then I realized as an adult, this book was written in season 1, and that was established as non-canonical in season 6. So I'm being really harsh on these people without realizing it. But being a fan of Adventure Time and being a fan of Kurt, and the humanism at the core of both of them, but especially Kurt Vonnegut, is what made me want to do it. And the initial project was actually, let's adapt one of Vonnegut's books and see where it goes. And Slaughterhouse-Five was not going to be my choice because it's such a huge, scary, important, beautiful book. And you don't want to be the person to mess up Vonnegut, right? Like, you don't want to be the guy who's like, I made him worse, please enjoy. And so I thought if we could start with something smaller, start with your Sirens of Titan, and then move up to Slaughterhouse-Five, that would be safer. But then turned out they really want to do Slaughterhouse-Five. And I said, well, I almost said no because I was afraid. But then I thought I would not like myself if I was saying no to this because I was afraid I'd do badly when I think I could do a good job. And so then it just became, I need to make this the best comic that I can, which is hard. I mean, that's the job of adaptation, right? Or you need to make it feel like it's more than just, here's the book with more pictures added. And so our guiding light with the Slaughterhouse-Five book was, let's make it feel as if you somehow had never heard of Kurt Vonnegut, and you somehow never heard of Slaughterhouse-Five, you just picked up this book completely blind, completely cold, you would think, oh, this is a cool comic, and not, oh, what a cool adaptation of a book I haven't read. Like, let's make it stand alone as a comic 100%. And that was sort of the guiding light that I used in adapting it, to try to pull out all the comics, the language indigenous to comics and the techniques indigenous to comics. Let's pull those out and apply them as best we can to make it feel like this is something that lives in the medium rather than something that's a photocopy from a different medium a couple generations removed, if that makes any sense. I'm a big fan of comics, and I love the medium, I love the form, and I really wanted this to sort of live there and show that.
I mean, I think it does a beautiful job, and I'm a huge fan. So to read it and to be so, as I said, Vonnegut is my favorite author, not just because of I love his work and I love his humanism, I love the ideas and the beliefs inherent in it, but also, honestly, if I can be a little personal, I was introduced to it by my dad, and that connection is really important to me too. So there's all this that I have going into it, and reading it, I just thought it was just phenomenally done. There's such a care to it, and you can just see it. And this is the book we're talking about, everybody, Slaughterhouse-Five. It's a graphic novel adaptation, and it's done by our guest tonight, Ryan North, and the illustrator is Albert Montes. Is that the correct pronunciation of his last name?
Albert Montes, but yes.
So I got the last name right and the first name wrong. Albert Montes, and names are important. Yeah. So, and you can find this book, as always, on our bookshop.org book list. All our Power Hour authors that come on, we have their books for sale there, and we like bookshop.org because they support local bookstores.
They do. It's great.
So this is the book we're talking about. So when you first got the assignment, and again, thought about doing, I wouldn't say any is a lesser title, but a lesser known title, not as
less scary.
Yeah, not as part as the Pantheon. So when you decided it was Slaughterhouse-5, how many moments were there where you're like, I can't do this? There's so much here, because that's the other part of it. There's so much in Slaughterhouse-5.
Yeah.
What was the process of you? And I don't even want to use the word paring it down, because I don't like that. It sounds dismissive. But deciding what worked for what you wanted to do, what your voice in it was, because that is such, I almost think, and of course you're the person that does it, but I almost think doing adaptations is harder than doing something original, because you want to do something where, of course, you want your voice inherent in it in some aspect, but you also want to step out of the way at the same time. So how do you do that?
Well, it's funny, talking to a lot of other writers, I've more than once talked to someone, and we sort of described this condition we call Kurt Vonnegut disease, where after you read Kurt Vonnegut, you just start writing like Kurt Vonnegut. You really want to write like Kurt Vonnegut, and you're ripping him off. Like he has a very distinctive, beautiful voice, so simple and so direct, but so meaningful. And like, you just can't copy it. But when you're adapting his work, like, I got to lean into it and not feel guilty about writing like Kurt Vonnegut, because that was the goal of this. He does a lot of stuff in the book where rather than tell you the conversation, he'll summarize the conversation, which works great in prose, because you go through it so quickly, you get to the good stuff right away. But in comics, you can't do it the same way, because you can see the characters there, you can see they're having a conversation, and a narration box isn't the same as a word balloons. There were places where I had to actually write conversations. The biggest one was the climactic speech with Derby, where it's sort of his climax in the book, and it's described as how there's no heroes, there's no characters, but this is this guy's finest moment in his life. And it felt almost like Kurt was playing a prank on me, because it wasn't there. I had to write it. I was like, good call. But yeah, the process was I bought a new copy of the book with really thick margins, and I started rereading it and just making notes as I went. Ideas I could put in. Very little of, we don't need this, like we can cut this, but a lot of, this has to be, and like, this is an important line in the book. This is something that has stayed with me for the 20 years since I first read it. Like, I want this to be there. And then I had a marked up copy of Slaughterhouse-5 and still no comic script. And so I did two things. The first was, I knew how many pages my copy had. I knew how long the book was going to be, which is about 170, 180 pages. And so as I wrote, I had a formula that gave me a number showing how close I was to hitting that mark. So I knew I had this much room to write this scene. I couldn't go over, I'd ruin the whole book. So that helped. And the second thing was, I imagined that Kurt Vonnegut, my process of adaptation was, I imagined I was an editor, and I had, gotten this story from my author, Kurt, and it was going to be a graphic novel, and there were some lines crossed somewhere, and Kurt turned in this 400-page novel, and there's way too much there. This is not a comic script. This is a legit novel, but we need it to be a comic script. So my role as the adapter was also somewhat of an editor, to sort of be like, this we can show visually. This doesn't really work. Maybe we can do it some other way. A lot of not so much paring down, but trying to figure out the best way to do it. And it's tricky. It's tricky because when you're writing your own story, only you know what you were intending and how well you succeeded at that, based off the idea you had in your head. But when you're adapting a book, the answer key is out there. Like, everyone knows what the book looks like and what it says. And so they can judge how successful an adaptation it is because they know what it's supposed to be. So in that sense, I think you're right. It is a harder job because you can be created. Everyone knows what the answer is. But it's also an easier job because your characters are there and a lot of their dialogue is there and their personalities are there. And I really have to give a shout out to more than shout out, endless praise to Albert, the artist, because he took what I'd written in the script and just made it beautiful and gorgeous and did these versions of the characters that are now in my head as this is what these people look like. Like this is an example. This is what Billy Pilgrim, this is what Kilgore Trout looks like. I never really pictured him physically. And even when I read the script, I would just copy the physical descriptions that Vonnegut had and gave them to Albert to work with. But he came up with these characters that are just like so evocative and so like, of course, this is what this person looks like. Of course, it'll be like that. And speaking of the art, I will say the advantage we had in adaptation was that Slaughterhouse-Five is a story that jumps around a lot in time, obviously. And in prose, you need to take the time to say, this is the time period we're in, and this is what it looks like. But in comics, you can do that visually so much faster. Like it's so much clearer when you are in a underground meat locker in 1944 and a car in 1967, just by the colors and the clothing and everything else around them, that it helped a lot for the adaptation that we could sort of hit the ground running in these scenes where we're jumping around through time, because the art of comics, the literal visual art of comics, is doing that heavy lifting for us. And we can get to the meat, the good stuff faster than you can in prose, because you don't have to say, okay, now it's 1968 and Billy was in a car and it was a 60s car, blah, 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 blah. So it's interesting. It really made me appreciate the novel, of course, in a whole new way, but also it made me appreciate the medium of comics in a whole new way, of its power and the things it can do that other mediums can't. Yeah, sorry, I'll hop back to you because I can just talk about comics all day long.
No, that's why you're
but
here.
Please continue.
Again, as I say to our guests, I say, listen, I've done this 170 times. People are sick of hearing me talk. They want me in the corner. One of my favorite shows, we had Sydney Ballou, who is with Ballroom Extravaganza, a boxer, transgender, wonderful individual, incredibly bright, and has great stories. And literally, I asked him one question, put myself in the corner, and 55 minutes later, popped back up, and I was thrilled. And everyone else was like, that's nice. Robert, that's really good. And
all right.
I realize we're getting ahead of ourselves, though. We're both huge Vonnegut fans. We're both really familiar with the book, obviously. But perhaps in our audience who are not, can you give us a synopsis of the book? And, again, with Vonnegut, plot is always not the primary focus of the work, but just to give people a taste so they understand what they're in store for when they read this, and both the original novel itself and your piece of it, and then we'll look at some pages from it.
Sure, that's I should have done that. Thank you. This is almost a harder job than adapting the book. It's adapting it down to like 30 seconds. So Slaughterhouse-Five is Kurt Vonnegut's, I think, most famous work, and it is an anti-war novel about a sort of a young man, Billy Pilgrim, who goes off to World War II and gets captured pretty much right away, sent to a prisoner of war camp by the Germans. And he experiences the firebombing of Dresden, one of the few survivors. And this is also incidentally what happened to Kurt Vonnegut in real life. On top of this, Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. And so he sees his life out in front of him, behind him, and he jumps around in it without any control over what moment he's going to be going to next. And on top of that, there's aliens that look like hands with eyes on top of plungers called the Tralfamadorians, who also see time the same way and have abducted Billy for their alien zoo on their planet Tralfamador. I think you're right. I think when you describe a lot of Kurt Vonnegut's plots, they sound really bad. But I've often said, like dinosaur comics, it's the same pictures and different words. It's better than it sounds, because that sounds horrible. Why would you want to see the same pictures every day for 20 years? And Vonnegut, I think, is the same way. He does so much with this book. And of course, there's different readings to it. One is all of this stuff is literally happening to Billy Pilgrim. He's come unstuck in time. He's been abducted by aliens. He's gone to the zoo where he's had a kid with this sex worker he's seen on TV. The other reading is, okay, no, he went to war and he has PTSD and he has flashbacks. And this is a way to visualize how he feels like he's become unmoored in his own life and experiences these memories of war all over and over and over again. And this is something that we left open in our adaptation. We didn't feel like it was our role to answer any questions or to be like, yes, here's what Kurt intended clearly. Our role was to bring it into this new medium as best we can, which I guess is hard, but fun, if I can say that. It's a hard but fun job.
Yeah, I mean, I do not envy that piece of trying to put all these wonderful ideas and all this language together in a different package, and that's why I was so impressed because I read it with great trepidation. I thought there's no way. And you think about the film adaptations. I think the film of Slaughterhouse Five is really powerful. I think it's really well done. I think that the little-known adaptation of Mother Night, I think is a really well-done film. I think it didn't get the credit it deserved. But then you have the Bruce Willis's Breakfast of Champions, which is let's be kind, say it's a shit show. So there's different. Not that there aren't like parts of it that are interesting, but it just doesn't service the material. What are your feelings about the films? And was that something you went to as well to kind of?
No, they actually weren't. I had seen the film adaptation of Slaughterhouse Five years ago, but it was very intentional not to rewatch it and not to read any other prose to comics adaptations. And the reason was that twiggy thing I have about originality, where I didn't want to feel like if I saw a clever idea or a neat trick in the adaptation, I didn't want to feel like, oh, I can't use that because it's been done before. It was done in this film adaptation in the 70s, so now I can't do it. And so by simply ignoring it, I could still feel like I'm being original, not get too caught up in my own head. But yeah, like the film is interesting because I remember the book, it has this sort of repetitive metronome of so it goes, every death, so whenever someone dies, so it goes, so it goes, so it goes. And it's the same in our comic. But if I recall correctly, the movie does not say the phrase so it goes at all, which is crazy because you'd think that would make it a completely different word. Like whenever you mention Slaughterhouse Five, people almost reflexively say so it goes. But the movie stands on its own merits in that medium because they weren't just copying it, which I think is the mark of a good adaptation, is taking what works and fixing what doesn't, so it doesn't interfere with the work. But yes, it was a process of trying to figure out what worked and trying to make it feel like it was, like in my head, it was always intended to be a comic because that was a fantasy I built for myself. So trying to make it read that way was a hard thing. It's funny, normally when people talk about my work and praise the work, I have a very innate and perhaps very Canadian being like, oh, it's fine. You don't need to, it's fine. I know there's flaws, blah, blah, blah. But with comics is a collaborative medium. And I always am thrilled to see what the artists do with the script. But doing an adaptation, like I didn't even write the story. It's Vonnegut's story. Vonnegut's characters, Albert's art. I have like one tiny finger on the wheel. It feels like doing the adaptation, writing the script. And so when people say, Slaughterhouse Five graphic novel is great, I'm like, yeah, right? Isn't it amazing? I can't believe what Kurt and Albert did with this book. It's so neat. So I really, it's almost kind of freeing to be able to talk about your own work without any ego because it's honestly not my own work. I'm just part of a team with a dead man and a man in Barcelona.
But I mean, that's the magic of it, is that you knew where you could put your voice and you knew how important it was to have one finger on the wheel, whereas most writers would want 5 or 10 or even 15 fingers on the wheel and would insist on it becoming
Well, I'll tell you, I imagined at the beginning, because there's a version of this where in the prose novel, Kurt Vonnegut is front and center and has him himself there as a character. He's like, hey, this is me, this is Kurt, this happened to me, here's the first 30 pages is like, here's the origin of the novel. Here's me talking to my real life friends about it. Here's where the title comes from. Here's how hard it was to write. And now we'll start the story. And so there's obviously a version of the graphic novel adaptation where it's like, hey, let's take that idea. And so it's me and Albert talking about our process of adaptation and making about ourselves. And I could see the argument for doing that, but I just thought like, maybe it's the hero worship. I was like, I don't want to read a comic that's an adaptation of Slaughterhouse-Five. I was talking about two people I don't know their experience with it. I want a comic adaptation of Slaughterhouse-Five. Like Vonnegut's great. Let's keep him there. So he's there in the book, and we as authors are there a little bit. The major thing we changed that sort of you can see the Ryan and Albert stuff there is in the prose novel. There's a character named Kilgore Trout who's a failed science fiction author who writes these stories, and whenever his fans write him, his one fan writes him, the publisher has failed. Like his books make publishers go bankrupt. They lose money. No one knows him. He's also a really bad writer, but he has these really good ideas, and the ideas are the only good part. And so for the adaptation, we thought, well, let's make him a comic artist. He's always failed out of science fiction. Now he's writing comic books, which is like a meta joke on how people see the medium, but also it lets us see his stories as actual like golden age kind of like EC horror comic stuff. So we get to use the medium to its biggest strengths and change the art style, change the coloring, change the lettering, change everything to show here's a comic in a comic, except now you're getting to read what Kilgore Trout would have written if he was a cartoonist at this time period. And it worked in my head great, but I wasn't sure how it would work on paper because that's a big ask. And I imagine kind of a bad reputation for doing this to artists where I say, I know you signed on to write this book. Let's have a different art and narrative style for a couple pages that's completely different. Throw everything out, start over, do something new. And Albert knocked it out of the park. Like it's such an amazing sequence of these Vonnegut comics, or these Kilgore Trout comics. And like that sort of change felt like that is an informed change and it's a justifiable change. And if I read a review or someone said, Ryan, I hated how you made Kilgore Trout a cartoonist, I could say, well, here's the reasoning and here's why I think it's actually really cool. And I could back it up. But if it was someone saying, hey, I wish you hadn't put yourself in the first 30 pages of the comic, if I had done that, I'd be like, you know what? I can't really defend it beyond like, I think it'd be cool to have me and Kurt Vonnegut in the same book together. So I tried to remove my ego from it as much as possible and try to think like, what is the best version of this book? What's the best way to make it? And it was funny, as I was writing it, I listened to an old interview with Kurt, and he was talking about movie adaptations. And he's saying, look, I think actually all movie adaptations are doomed to be failures because when you're writing a book, the author is such a main character. The author's voice is right there. Even if they're not there, even if they're not literally there like Kurt is in Slaughterhouse-Five, where he writes himself in as a character, the author as the person in your head is so foregrounded and so there all the time that you will absolutely lose that in a movie because you're seeing other people. And I listened to that after we had written scenes in the book where Kurt appears. And I was like, all right, good, we made the right choice. Like Kurt shows up there. The most literal example is one where in the book, Kurt says, it's just 2 words inside this whole sequence. Kurt says something like, listen, the next thing that Billy Pilgrim says that happened to him is this. And the word says there does so much, right? Like it's implying that this is a real story and that it happened to a man named Billy Pilgrim and that Billy Pilgrim has told Kurt Vonnegut what those events were and now Kurt's writing them down just by saying Billy Pilgrim says. And so there's a couple pages in the book where the story kind of stops and you see Kurt and Billy and this white boy, and Billy's in his costume, his military costume, and Kurt's just taking notes like a reporter. And Kurt asks him what happens next, and Billy tells him. Billy says what this thing is. And that was another trick where it felt like this is one word, the word says in the prose novel. But if you think of what that word implies, you can do so much with it in this comic book version to get the same idea of this is real and Billy is telling this to Kurt. We can show that without having to, put too fine a point of it, but still be able to justify it. The other thing that I think the graphic novel version did really well, I should say, is the Tralfamadorian book. So in the prose novel, the Tralfamadorians are these aliens who see all of time all at once. So a human being looks like a range of mountains with a baby at one end and a corpse at the other, and this person aging, getting taller and shorter in between. And so at a certain point, Billy asks to read the Tralfamadorian book, and Kurt describes it as a series of paragraphs. He can't read it, but they explain how the book works. And it's a series of words, paragraphs, urgently describing a scene. That's just one scene in time. And when you read the book all at once, you get a bunch of these scenes all together that add up to this image of life that's beautiful and moving and haunting and sweet. And reading that, I was like, what he's describing here is comics. Like, if you look at a page of comics, it's a series of images arranged with care that you see all at once, but describe this image of life and beauty that's important and everything else. And so the Tralfamadorian comic is shown in the book as this 2-page spread you open where suddenly you're reading a Tralfamadorian book just for a moment. And it let us sort of give you that visceral experience of seeing things all at once while also doing something that you can only do in comics. Like, I love that Kurt was describing comics without realizing it. And in this adaptation, we can just sort of take that seed and let it bloom and be like, yes, you are reading a medium where you're unstuck in time and where you can turn a page and jump forward and backwards and you don't know where you're going to land next, and sort of experience as a reader what the character is doing as he goes through this narrative. I think is a really neat thing that we have hopefully pulled off.
You pulled it off beautifully. And, otherwise you wouldn't be on my show, just so you know. It was almost a spit take.
Almost. That's good. You got me.
I love the fact that you talk about the language of comics and how that is so much a part of how Vonnegut wrote. And it leads me to think about, Scott McCloud and, his seminal books, Understanding Comics, Reading Comics, Making Comics, and talking about the use of the gutter. And I think that is such a strong part of what you've done here, is making use of this medium because it celebrates really the ideas and the practice of how Vonnegut wrote. So I think that's where your success really lies, is such a respect for the language of comics and how it really is parallel to the language of Vonnegut.
Yeah, there's some really neat tricks. I call them tricks. I guess I should call them like intentional art decisions that we made. Where like for the time sequences where he's jumping in time, usually that's shown with a thin sort of purple panel to show that we're going through time. But there's some sequences where we get to use the structure of comics to do that. There's one where he is in the 60s and he's drunk. He's in the backseat of a car. He's thrown up on himself. And then in the next moment, he's back in World War II as this wandering soldier trying to escape capture. And there's another soldier who's like shoving him and saying, move, asshole, you're such an idiot, that sort of stuff. And in the comic, we got to do that by having him one panel where this is at the bottom of the page, on the left-hand side, he's just sitting in the car, so he's thrown up in his lap. In the second panel, he's being shoved by this hand that comes off the page, like through the bleed, across the gutter, out of the panel, into him. And it's the 1944 soldier's hand sort of breaking through the boundary of the comic in a way that you couldn't normally do to shove him. And then you turn the page and you're back in the 40s. And it's this sort of stuff where like there is a language to comics and there's assumptions we bring as we move from panel to panel. And when you know what those are, you can play with them to get this sense of being unstuck in time, of having events that happen in two places at once. There's another sequence where he's in this slaughterhouse in this, meat cooling area as Dresden's being bombed. He's sitting on this bench just waiting for time to pass. And someone off panel says, what are we going to do with you? And he turns and it's his daughter from the 60s wearing like a polka dot dress and she's brightly colored and clearly out of place. And he replies, I don't know. And in the next panel, you're in the 60s and she's there in the car just as she was sitting, and Billy's in the same place, and we're fully in the 60s, and she's saying, I know you don't know, like you need to listen to me, Dad. And it's this idea of that middle panel, it's not 100% clear what time period we are in. We're sort of switching between them. And we don't have to use a word to say that. We can just have a character show up in a polka dot dress, and by that point, you realize you've trained yourself, you've learned just by reading the comic that he is slipping through time here, and this is how it's manifesting on the page of the book you're reading. It's such an interesting medium. I've been working on it, in it, and on it for like 20 years almost, and there's still new things I'm discovering. And it's sort of this. If I can talk up comics for a second,
Please.
There's this really neat thing. I love video games too, and I realized once that like my standard for a great video game is not just it's fun, exciting, and beautiful and everything else, but it should be doing something new that I haven't seen before. Like I want originality. Coming back to this idea of originality, and like Mario 64 compared to Mario 3, both are great games, and both are doing stuff that had not been seen before. They're taking these leaps forward in the medium. And if you think about it, that is a huge bar, right? Like no one reads a novel and says, this was good, but it didn't do something new in the form of prose that I haven't seen yet in this hundreds-year-old art form. And so it's not great. But I can believe that with games. Like if a game is great, it's probably doing something that has not been seen before in this 50-year-old art form. And comics is also a young medium, and there's stuff that you can do. Like one of my favorite artists is Jason Shiga, and every time I read a Shiga book, he is doing something new with the medium that I haven't seen before, and that's such a high bar, right? Like that's a high bar for any medium, but we're in this time where that's still happening. It's so exciting to be seeing a medium sort of discover itself as it goes, and for people to realize that for artists and even readers to realize that there's new stuff that hasn't yet been done that is still being discovered and is being done. So I'm not saying that I did anything fully original in Slaughterhouse-5 adaptation, but I was trying to capture that spirit of let's push this medium. Let's do everything we can to make it be a story that could only be told in comics, despite the fact it's already been told in a non-comics medium. Like let's go as far as we can with that to make it feel like this is a comic and not a photocopy, which I think I've already said, but that's the guiding light of this project.
So for those of you just joining us, and I cannot believe how quickly the hour is going, but I want to, again, this is the book we're talking about, Slaughterhouse-5, or The Children's Crusade by Kurt Vonnegut, graphic novel adaptation by our lovely guest tonight, Ryan North and Albert Montes. And let's look at some pages from it, but before we do that, let us tell everybody you can get this book on our bookshop.org list for the BRCSJ Social Justice Power Hour. All the authors who come on here need your support. We need to support our community, and we do that by buying their books. And I wouldn't bring anybody on this show that I didn't believe fully in their work. This is a tremendous piece of work, and it should be something on your shelves. And as I say, when I believe in a book, buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend, buy one for an enemy who will become a friend. Call your local school. This is a great book for a high school to have. So call your local school district and see if they have it in their high school. And if they don't, buy a copy. And then it'll be banned the next year, and it'll be huge because all the kids will want to read it. And finally, and almost most importantly, call your local library and make sure they have a copy on their shelves too. Because although we want to encourage everyone to buy a copy and support Ryan and his work, not everybody can afford to buy every book. And libraries are a great way for folks who can't to be exposed to really powerful, important works like this book. And now I'm going to show you some pages from it so you understand that I'm not just talking out the side of my, wherever people talk out the side of. So here's the panels. And I'm going to pop off, Ryan, so everybody can see the pages better, and you can tell us what we're seeing.
Yeah. So what we have here is a page where Billy is in a veterans hospital with another character, and that's his wifey in the chocolate bar there. And the neat thing here is I did this trick where I thought I was being clever, and I found out later I was not being clever. The character here is Elliot Rosewater, and he's a star. Vonnegut reuses characters a lot, where the Tralfamadorians show up elsewhere in a different way, but they're still Tralfamadorians. And Elliot Rosewater is a character in a book called God Bless You, Elliot Rosewater. or God bless you, Mr. Rosewater. And I thought, I'm going to be so sneaky. I'm going to sneak in a line where the character says, God bless you, Mr. Rosewater. And it'll be like a hint towards this Kurt Vonnegut, prose universe. And I realized afterwards, I never actually looked up what order the novels were written in, that God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater was written first. And Slaughterhouse 5 was written after that. And so Kurt Vonnegut had already decided clearly not to do this thing that I did. But I was like, nope, low-hanging fruit going in. I did it. So that's just wanted to show this page. Also because I love the way Albert tells stories here with the narration. So this is sort of the heart of the book here, Dresden, where we first see the city. And in the prose novel, what Kurt describes is this beautiful city, and then it ends with that character at the bottom, who's actually Kurt Vonnegut, saying Oz. But the great thing about comics is you have full control over the reader's experience with the page. When you write a prose novel, you don't know when the reader is turning the page. You don't know if your word is going to end up at the top of the page, at the bottom. But in comics, you do. And I know when the reader is going to be turning the page. So I want to have a little cliffhanger or a question or something to make them feel like, what happens next? What happens next? It gives you this feeling of forward momentum in the story. And so I changed the line here where Kurt gets out, instead of just saying, oh, it's Dresden, and he says the word, here we are. Just as the word Oz, in the comic, he says, there it is, ... And you turn the page and you get this beautiful shot of Dresden, where at the bottom he's saying Oz. And when Albert drew this page, there's so much work that went into it. He told me later he drew every single character's face and body individually, because when you're doing a crowd scene, you usually just sort of sketch things in and no one notices. But he thought, this is the heart of the book. This is the soul of the book. Let's make every single person here an individual and a character. Later on in the book, it's not really a spoiler because Kurt tells you how the story's going to go. Dresden gets firebombed, and you see the rubble, and it's very important and very moving. This page is where Billy first meets Kilgore Trout, and what I loved about this is for the adaptation, at the very bottom, he's basically saying, "Oh, are you Kilgore Trout?" And Kilgore Trout's saying, "No, what do you mean?" And Billy says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Kilgore Trout, he's an author." And Trout says, "Excuse me?" And he's like, he writes books. You haven't heard of him? And in the novel, Trout says, nobody ever did. And that hesitation is one of the very rare times he sort of does that in the book, of trying to get across how the character says it. And of course, the comics' indigenous way of doing that is to have two-word balloons. So at the bottom, Trout says, nobody, there's a dash. And the second balloon gives you that pause where he says, no, nobody ever did. And you get the sensation. And this is why I say, I just had one finger on the wheel, because so much of this conversation is in the acting of the characters, how they react to each other, their body language. Billy Pilgrim holding up a hand at one point, sort of like, I don't want any trouble. This whole thing there's a bit of that in the script, I guess, but most of this is Albert thinking, how would these characters act? What would they look like? And then drawing it. Like I always say, comics writer is the easy job, because this is so much more work. And here's an example of sort of a fun comics trick we did, where, again, Kurt Vonnegut described the conversation rather than actually telling you what happened. And one way you can have fun with that, while not having to write something wholesale, is this trick we did here. So these two characters, they're captured, and they're having the, how did you get captured conversation. And you can see in that third panel, one character begins to speak, and there's a narration box on top of his word balloon that's basically telling you the gist of what he's saying. And I felt like this is a trick I can do once. It's a trick that kind of reads as a joke, but also works really well. It kind of works like gangbusters to sort of skip ahead to the boring parts, get to the good parts. But you play that card once, and if you do it again, you start thinking well, why can't I hear this in his own words? Why don't I get to hear the actual character? So this is where I got to play that card and not have to write something new. I think it works really well. And the cheat there at the end is that the character is saying, we came out with our hands up because we wanted to go on living, sir, if we possibly could. But that's actually narration in the book. It's not the character saying that. But you change stuff, you adjust stuff, and you do all the tricks you can to make it feel like this was how it was always intended.
I think that this is the stuff that, as a comics geek, I love to to play with the medium, as you said, to find something new. This is not something that folks had done. And you said, here's a conundrum. Here's what Vonnegut does. He doesn't have the dialogue. He describes dialogue. So how do I do that? And again, this was the little touch that makes this from something that's really good, that's something that's really enjoyable, to something that's really a masterwork of the craft.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I can say it's a good book because I'm one little guy in it.
So this is the book again, one last time, as we round out our last couple of minutes, which I am so sad about. Slaughterhouse-Five. It's a great graphic novel adaptation of a book that one would think would not be adaptable in this way and so powerfully done. And you said, it's interesting because one of my questions was going to be, you excised Vonnegut as a character out of the graphic novel. And his voice is so important, his voice is so strong. And one of the things for me as a reader, as I was growing up and reading his stuff, was having him as a character allowed so much more care into what was happening. That he was at Dresden, that he dealt, so to do that and still be able to have that emotional strength remain was also another piece of how good you are as a storyteller and how much your humility serves you well in telling this story.
Oh God, I can just say at the beginning, when this book was announced, I did an interview with Stars and Stripes. And so that was a phone conversation with a guy in the military in Afghanistan. He's calling me at Some Ungodly Hour. I'm up at Some Ungodly Hour, and we're talking about Slaughterhouse-Five, and he loves the book too. And we're talking about, he asked me some, pretty heavy questions about war. And I'm suddenly super aware that I am just this Canadian guy talking about, you don't feel like more of an idiot and a jerk than saying war is bad over the phone to a guy who's there in Afghanistan who knows war is bad. You just need me to tell him. But I get the sort of borrowed authenticity of Vonnegut, who was there and did experience it. And my job is to get that across as best and as effectively as possible so that you don't lose the heart and the core of it. And if that means I have to, feel like a jerk some of the time, I think that's a price worth paying. Right.
I'm not, there's no comment to that. I think that it's really difficult when you're talking to someone who's in the middle of something and you're an outsider to it, but your voice and your imagination, I think that your spirit and your, as Kurt would love us to say, your humanism allows you to have such empathy that your voice is really strong in this. And I think that that's a concern that you have to have because that's yours. But I don't think that it's a concern that is necessary in the scheme of things because you can see and hear and feel it in your work.
Thank you.
So that's the book, Ryan North. And I indulge me because, so may I ask you this? And if this is too personal, please slap my hand virtually. So our birthdays are tomorrow. May I ask you what year are you turning?
I am turning, in the middle of a global pandemic, I'm turning 40 years old. Big 4-0. How about you?
I'll be 51.
Really? I would not have guessed that. You are looking great.
Thank you. I have.
I thought you were going to say 42. I was ready for we're both same birthday, same age, exactly.
Well, I appreciate you saying so. It's been I've had a very good life. I've had a very good community. I have a very good family. I'm a very fortunate man. And I guess it shows. So, my friend, thank you so much. Let me ask you this, since it's both our birthdays tomorrow, I'm going to indulge myself for a moment. Did you ever get to meet Vonnegut?
No, I didn't. He passed away when I was just in undergrad, I think. I never got the chance to meet him. I did get to meet his son, Mark, as part of an event with the Vonnegut Library for the launch of the book. Okay. And I spent the whole time being just I met him virtually, over a Zoom meeting. I didn't meet him in person, but I was just trying to be cool, not trying to be too much of a fanboy. So it was like, oh, nice to meet you, Mark. I'm super cool and not freaking out at all.
And Mark himself is such an incredible inspirational figure. I mean, he's
very funny.
Yeah. I have to say, so I will. I'm going to indulge myself here. I met Kurt Vonnegut, and it was one of those moments that was absolutely perfect. I got to go with my dad.
Tell me.
He introduced me to his work. We met him at Union Square in New York City, and he couldn't have been more magnanimous, more generous, more Vonnegut. He was just perfectly Vonnegut. And this is my indulgence right here for my birthday. This is my gift to myself. I got to show him this. I did a sketch of him.
Oh my God.
Vonnegut, and it was one of those moments. So that's what I got to do. And he was everything you imagine him to be.
That's great. That's amazing. That's perfect. Well done.
Thank you for your time tonight. We're now in the after party. Prince be proud. Thank you for spending the eve of your birthday with us. I would love you to come back and talk further about your work. Your work is, I think, fascinating, and there's so much more that we could explore. We could spend a whole hour on Squirrel Girl. There's so much in there, too. But thank you, my friend. I really enjoyed this time with you.
My pleasure. I did, too. Appreciate it.
You be well. You be good. And I hope that you will come back to us, because I think we have a lot more we could talk about, and I think the community.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. Take care, and the happiest of birthdays tomorrow.
You too. Happy preemptive birthday.
All right. Take care. So that is Ryan North, everybody. Wonderful author. Really, honestly, scratching the surface of everything he's done. And please do explore. I want to thank our volunteer, Chris, for always being in the comment section. You can see so many of what Chris shared with you in the comment section. To find Ryan on Tools of the Devil, social media, his own website, his work, and so on and so forth. Please do engage in that a bit. I promise you it's a rabbit hole that you will really enjoy going down. I want to also, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank everybody who came out on Friday night when we had our big birthday virtual event here at the Power Hour. I know that the video is down right now because of copyright issues. One of our lovely drag queens did a song, and we garnered the wrath of a music company. So we're disputing it under fair use and under Drag Queens Are Beautiful. I think that's a law, so we're allowed to do that. And hopefully it'll be back up on the page soon. But we will be sharing out tomorrow on my actual birthday. The center is going to share out some of the wonderful videos that were shared that night. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Really great hour. I want to thank Ryan North again for sharing his time with us. We will see you tomorrow night for Crew Yoga with Master Jasmani. We could all use the time to take a breath, both literally and figuratively in these days. We have our disclosure panel coming up talking about that great transgender documentary. And of course, Jill Sobu will be back with us with Mike Hotpence as well on Friday night. So big fun, big empowerment, big enlightenment, and maybe even a little entertaining. Love you all. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you again in about 2 hours and 55 minutes. In the meanwhile, please be good to each other, be good to your families, chosen or otherwise, and most importantly, be good to yourselves. Much love and respect. And as always, we're going to end the night imploring you to use your voice and to vote, and to encourage you to do that. I'm going to play this again because, gosh, it's a lot of fun, and I think that it's a good way for you to feel empowered to get your voice heard and your voice out. Until tomorrow, everybody.